My lazy sister interrupted my colonoscopy prep to say she was selling my car by banging on the bathroom door at 6 o'clock in the morning, exactly when the second dose of Go-Litelly was starting to kick in. Mom said you don't need the Camry anymore because you can take Uber, Vanessa announced through the door, adding that she had already deposited the $8,000 from the sale into her account to keep it safe. I gripped the bathroom counter, my intestines cramping violently, watching my reflection go pale under the fluorescent light. Through the door, I could hear her filing her nails, while explaining how she'd forged my signature on the title transfer yesterday afternoon. She'd even printed fake power of attorney documents using templates she found online. The cramping intensified. I reached for my phone on the sink and texted my gastroenterologist's office that I needed to reschedule, then opened my banking app with shaking hands. The bathroom tile felt cold against my bare feet as Vanessa continued talking, her voice cheerful, almost giddy. She described how the buyer, some college kid named Brandon, had been so grateful for the below-market price. My 2012 Camry, meticulously maintained, barely 60,000 miles, handed over for $8,000 when it was worth at least $14,000. She mentioned that Mom had co-signed the bill of sale at the kitchen table last night while I was doing the first round of prep. Mom's handwriting confirming the transaction. Mom's retirement community address listed as the vehicle location. I heard Vanessa's footsteps retreat down the hallway, still talking about how she deserved the money after taking care of Mom these past 3 years. Taking care meaning visiting twice a month to ask for money while I paid Mom's supplemental insurance, drove her to every appointment, and organized her medications into weekly pill boxes. I was supposed to be at the endoscopy center in 2 hours. Instead, I sat on my bathroom floor, phone in hand, pulling up the folder I'd labeled Family Documents 6 months ago. Back when Vanessa had casually mentioned she was thinking about becoming Mom's legal guardian because Mom was getting forgetful. Back when I'd noticed Mom's checkbook had 5 missing checks. Back when I'd quietly installed a camera in Mom's kitchen after Vanessa let slip she had a key to Mom's place. The camera that had been recording every conversation, every forged signature practice session, every phone call where Vanessa coached Mom on what to say to the bank. I had 47 video files, time-stamped, backed up to 3 separate cloud accounts. I looked at my reflection in the bathroom mirror one more time, then opened my contacts and scrolled past Mom and Vanessa to a name I'd added 3 weeks ago. Detective Sarah Chen, Financial Crimes Unit. The colonoscopy could wait. This couldn't. 3 hours later, I sat in a coffee shop across from Detective Chen, my phone between us showing video number 12, Vanessa coaching our 71-year-old mother on how to claim she'd given Vanessa permission to access her accounts. Mom's voice confused, asking why she needed to say that. Vanessa's response, patient but firm. Because Rebecca is trying to steal from you, Mom. We need to protect your money. The detective's jaw tightened. She'd already watched videos 1 through 11, her notepad filling with timestamps and observations. Video 13 showed Vanessa practicing my signature on a notepad, comparing it to my driver's license photo she'd snapped when I left my purse on Mom's kitchen counter during a visit. Detective Chen asked if I had the original title to the Camry. I pulled it from my bag. I'd retrieved it from my safe deposit box during the hour I'd spent canceling my colonoscopy and documenting everything. Vanessa had forged a duplicate. Your sister's been doing this systematically, Detective Chen said, tapping her pen against the table. The car is just the latest. I'll need copies of everything. Bank statements, the camera footage, any correspondence. She explained that elder financial abuse cases were notoriously difficult to prosecute unless the family member kept immaculate records. Lucky for me, I had. Unlucky for Vanessa, she'd been sloppy. The detective mentioned that the forged power of attorney documents alone carried a felony charge. Combined with the identity theft, the car title fraud, and the financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, Vanessa was looking at multiple felonies with mandatory minimum sentences. I asked how long the investigation would take. Detective Chen said she could have enough for an arrest warrant within 48 hours if I provided everything today. I spent the next 6 hours at the police station, uploading files, providing statements, walking through a timeline that stretched back 14 months. Every borrowed $20 from Mom's purse. Every check made out to cash. Every time Vanessa had convinced Mom to withdraw money for emergencies that never existed. The detective noted that Vanessa had stolen approximately $34,000 from Mom over the past year. Combined with my car, the total exceeded $40,000. Federal charges could apply. I signed forms, authorized records releases, and provided the contact information for Mom's neurologist, the one who diagnosed her with mild cognitive impairment 8 months ago. The diagnosis Vanessa claimed didn't exist. By the time I left the station, my phone had 17 missed calls from Vanessa and 9 from Mom. I didn't return any of them. Instead, I drove to Mom's retirement community, used my key, and sat with her while she ate dinner. She asked where Vanessa was. I told her Vanessa was busy. Mom nodded, seeming relieved. That night, I transferred Mom into my guest bedroom with her permission and the blessing of her neurologist, who'd been concerned about Vanessa's helpfulness during recent appointments. Mom's doctor provided written documentation that Mom needed supervised care and that I was the appropriate caregiver. I filed emergency guardianship paperwork the next morning. Vanessa discovered Mom was gone when she showed up at the retirement community that afternoon, demanding the manager open Mom's apartment. The manager, who I'd briefed that morning, declined. Vanessa called me screaming. I let it go to voicemail, saved the recording, and forwarded it to Detective Chen. Vanessa's voice on that message, threatening to make me pay for kidnapping Mom, provided excellent evidence of consciousness of guilt. The detective mentioned that when people started making threats, they usually knew exactly what they'd done wrong. The arrest happened on a Wednesday morning. I know because Vanessa called me from the police station at 9:15 a.m., her voice shaking, asking what was happening. I hung up without saying anything. She called back 6 times. I blocked her number. Her public defender called me that afternoon, asking if I'd be willing to testify. I said I'd be delighted to. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks out. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Amanda Reeves, told me that Vanessa was trying to claim she had Mom's permission for everything. Amanda asked if I'd be willing to have Mom evaluated by a forensic psychologist. I scheduled the appointment for the following Tuesday. The psychologist's report, delivered 8 days later, concluded that Mom lacked the capacity to manage complex financial decisions and had likely been manipulated by a trusted family member. Vanessa's defense strategy collapsed. Her attorney started talking about a plea deal, but I wasn't interested in deals. The prosecutor's office offered Vanessa a plea deal: plead guilty to 3 felony counts, serve 18 months, pay restitution. Amanda Reeves called me personally to explain the offer, her tone apologetic. Budget constraints, she said. Overloaded docket. A guaranteed conviction versus the risk of trial. I listened politely, thanked her for the call, and then told her I wanted to testify at trial. Amanda went quiet for a moment before asking if I was certain. I told her I had 47 videos, 18 months of bank records, and a car title with my sister's clumsy forgery. I told her I had text messages where Vanessa bragged to her boyfriend about finally getting what she deserved from our family. Amanda's tone shifted. She asked if I could come to her office that afternoon. I arrived with 3 banker's boxes of evidence. Amanda and her paralegal, a meticulous man named Derek, spent 4 hours reviewing everything. The text messages to Vanessa's boyfriend, Marcus, were particularly damning. In one exchange from 5 months ago, Vanessa had written, "Rebecca is so stupid. She thinks Mom's money is going to medical bills. I just bought those Louboutins you liked." Marcus had responded with a laughing emoji and, "Your sister's gonna be pissed when she finds out." Vanessa's reply, "She'll never find out. Mom can't remember shit anyway." Derek photographed every page. Amanda made notes in the margins of her legal pad. When they finished, Amanda looked at me across her desk and said Vanessa had made this remarkably easy to prosecute. Then she asked about my car. I explained that Brandon, the college kid who'd bought it, had already been contacted by police. He still had the forged bill of sale. He'd even kept text messages from Vanessa assuring him the car was definitely hers to sell. Brandon had been cooperative, terrified he'd be charged as an accessory. He'd immediately offered to return the Camry, but it was now evidence. Detective Chen had it towed to an impound lot where it would stay until after trial. Brandon was out $8,000, though the prosecutor's office assured him he could pursue civil recovery against Vanessa once the criminal case concluded. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. But Brandon had ignored red flags. A seller who didn't have the car's maintenance records, who couldn't answer basic questions about the vehicle's history, who'd been oddly insistent on meeting in a grocery store parking lot instead of at a residence. He'd wanted a deal badly enough to overlook obvious warning signs. That was on him. What mattered now was that his testimony would corroborate the forgery charges. Amanda scheduled him as a witness. Trial was set for 7 weeks out. Vanessa's attorney tried one more time to negotiate. He called Amanda directly, proposing that Vanessa would plead to misdemeanors, pay full restitution, and accept probation. Amanda forwarded me the email. I responded in 3 words. Reject the offer. Amanda did. Vanessa's attorney then filed a motion to suppress the camera footage from Mom's kitchen, arguing I'd violated wiretapping laws. The motion hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks before trial. I sat in the courtroom gallery while Amanda systematically dismantled the argument. Mom's apartment was her residence, and I was her designated emergency contact with documented permission to access her home. The camera had been installed in a common area, not a bedroom or bathroom. Most critically, I had been investigating suspected financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, a legal exception to recording consent requirements. The judge denied the motion within 10 minutes of closing arguments. Vanessa's attorney looked like he'd aged 5 years. As I left the courthouse, I saw Vanessa in the hallway, flanked by Marcus. She looked at me with pure hatred. I smiled and kept walking. Mom's guardianship hearing happened 3 weeks before trial. Vanessa's attorney had filed an objection, claiming Mom was competent and that I was isolating her from family. The judge ordered an independent evaluation. The court-appointed evaluator, Dr. Patricia Bowman, spent 6 hours with Mom over 3 sessions. Her report was unambiguous. Mom had moderate cognitive impairment, was highly susceptible to manipulation, and had been financially exploited. Dr. Bowman noted that Mom became agitated when asked about Vanessa, repeatedly saying she didn't want to cause trouble. When asked about me, Mom relaxed visibly and described our daily routines in detail: the morning crossword puzzle we did together, the afternoon walks, the cooking lessons I'd been giving her for simple meals she could manage independently. The judge granted me full guardianship. Vanessa's objection was noted for the record and dismissed. I was now legally responsible for all of Mom's financial, medical, and personal decisions. I immediately filed a civil restraining order against Vanessa on Mom's behalf. Granted. The restraining order meant Vanessa couldn't contact Mom directly or come within 500 feet of my home. Violations would result in immediate arrest. I had copies of the order laminated and kept one in my purse, one in my car, and one posted on my front door. Vanessa tested it exactly once, showing up at my house at 11 p.m. 4 days after the order was served, pounding on the door and screaming that I'd stolen her mother. I called the police from my bedroom window where I was recording her on my phone. Officers arrived within 6 minutes. Vanessa was arrested for violating the restraining order and spent the night in county jail. Her bail was set at $5,000. Marcus posted it the next morning. I received a notification from the court that Vanessa now had an additional misdemeanor charge. Her attorney filed a motion to consolidate it with the felony trial. Amanda opposed the motion successfully, arguing that the violation was a separate incident demonstrating ongoing criminal intent. Vanessa would face that charge separately after the main trial concluded. 2 weeks before trial, I received a Facebook message from someone named Jennifer Caldwell. She identified herself as our cousin, Dad's sister's daughter, someone I hadn't seen since Dad's funeral 12 years ago. Jennifer wrote that she'd heard about Vanessa's legal troubles through family gossip and wanted me to know that Vanessa had done something similar to her widowed mother 3 years ago. Smaller scale, Jennifer explained, but the same pattern. Forged checks, stolen debit card, lies about helping with finances. Jennifer's mother had been too embarrassed to press charges. She'd simply cut Vanessa off and never spoken about it again. Jennifer said she wished she'd reported it then because maybe it would have stopped Vanessa from targeting Mom. She asked if I needed her to testify about the prior bad acts. I immediately forwarded the message to Amanda. Prior bad acts were usually inadmissible, but evidence of a pattern could potentially come in under specific exceptions. Amanda scheduled a call with Jennifer that afternoon. Jennifer's testimony wouldn't be allowed in the prosecution's main case, Amanda explained, but it could be used if Vanessa took the stand and claimed she'd never done anything like this before or didn't understand that her actions were wrong. It was ammunition for cross-examination. I asked Amanda if she thought Vanessa would testify. Amanda said most defendants didn't, But Vanessa struck her as someone who believed she could talk her way out of anything. Narcissists usually did. We'd see. Meanwhile, I continued documenting everything. Every interaction with Mom's doctors. Every expense from Mom's accounts, now under my sole control. Every medication. Every meal. Every moment of confusion or clarity. I kept a daily log in a spiral notebook that I photographed and backed up to cloud storage each night. If Vanessa's attorney tried to paint me as the exploitative one, I'd have a paper trail showing the opposite. But he never got the chance. Trial started on a Monday in late April. The courthouse smelled like floor polish and recycled air. I sat in the front row of the gallery, directly behind the prosecution table, where Amanda and Derek organized their files. Jury selection took all day. Amanda struck anyone who seemed sympathetic to family loyalty arguments. She kept the accountant, the retired fraud investigator, the social worker who dealt with elder abuse cases. By 5 p.m., they had 12 jurors and 2 alternates. The judge, a stern woman named Patricia Valdez, set opening statements for 9 a.m. the next morning. I went home and made dinner for Mom, baked chicken, roasted vegetables, her favorite vanilla pudding for dessert. She asked why I seemed nervous. I told her I had an important meeting tomorrow. She patted my hand and said I'd do fine at whatever it was. I didn't correct her. Amanda's opening statement lasted 37 minutes. She walked the jury through the timeline methodically, highlighting each theft with precision. She described Vanessa as a predator who'd identified her own mother's vulnerability and exploited it systematically for personal gain. She showed the jury a blown-up photograph of the forged car title, my signature obviously copied in Vanessa's handwriting. She played a clip from one of my kitchen camera videos, just 45 seconds, where Vanessa told Mom that I was trying to steal everything and that Mom needed to trust only Vanessa with financial matters. In the video, Mom looked confused and frightened. 2 jurors shifted uncomfortably. One woman in the front row pressed her lips into a thin line. Amanda concluded by promising that the evidence would show beyond any reasonable doubt that Vanessa Mitchell had committed multiple felonies and that justice required conviction on all counts. Vanessa's attorney, a rumpled man named Gerald Foster, gave a 7-minute opening that essentially argued Vanessa had made mistakes in judgment, but had never intended to harm anyone. He claimed the family had communication problems and that this was a civil matter blown out of proportion. He suggested I was vindictive and controlling, that I'd manipulated Mom into believing false narratives. He said the camera footage was taken out of context. He mentioned nothing about the forged documents, the $34,000 stolen from Mom's accounts, or the text messages to Marcus. When he sat down, I caught Amanda and Derek exchanging a look. The defense was weak, and they knew it. Judge Valdez called for the prosecution's first witness. Amanda stood and said, "The people call Detective Sarah Chen." Detective Chen spent 2 hours on the stand, walking through her investigation with clinical precision. She described receiving my complaint, reviewing my documentation, and conducting follow-up interviews with Brandon, Mom's Bank, and the retirement community staff. She testified that in her 11 years investigating financial crimes, she'd rarely seen such clear-cut evidence of systematic exploitation. Gerald Foster's cross-examination lasted 12 minutes and accomplished nothing except making him look desperate. He suggested Detective Chen had been biased by my obviously rehearsed presentation of evidence. Detective Chen replied dryly that well-organized victims didn't make crimes less serious. One juror smiled briefly before resuming his neutral expression. Amanda called her next witness, Brandon Harper, the college kid who'd bought my car. Brandon was 20 years old, nervous and obviously remorseful. He testified that Vanessa had contacted him through a Facebook marketplace listing, offering the Camry at an estate sale price because her sister, me, had passed away suddenly, and the family needed to liquidate assets quickly. I felt the air leave my lungs. Vanessa had told him I was dead. Amanda let that sit with the jury for a long moment before continuing. Brandon described meeting Vanessa in the grocery store parking lot, how she'd seemed rushed and emotional, claiming she needed to finalize the sale quickly before flying back to handle funeral arrangements. He'd felt sorry for her. He'd paid cash, $8,000 withdrawn from his student loan refund, and accepted the bill of sale she'd printed on her home computer. He admitted he should have questioned why she didn't have the title in hand, but she'd seemed so genuinely distressed. When Amanda finished, Gerald Foster declined to cross-examine. Smart move. Making Brandon repeat the story would only reinforce how thoroughly Vanessa had lied. The bank representative testified next, a middle-aged woman named Patricia who managed Mom's branch. She brought printouts of every transaction on Mom's accounts for the past 18 months, each questionable withdrawal highlighted in yellow. $34,173 total. Patricia testified that she'd grown concerned 6 months ago when Mom came in to withdraw $2,000 in cash, seeming confused about why she needed it. Patricia had gently asked if everything was okay. Mom had said her daughter Vanessa needed money for medical bills. Patricia had noted the transaction in Mom's file and called the phone number listed on the account, my number, to verify. I'd been in a work meeting and missed the call. Patricia had left a voicemail I'd never received because my mailbox was full. She said she still regretted not trying harder to reach me. Amanda assured her she'd done what she could. The bank's records spoke for themselves. Mom's neurologist, Dr. Raymond Martinez, testified on day 3. He'd been treating Mom for 4 years, initially for high blood pressure, and then for cognitive issues that emerged around 2 years ago. He described Mom's diagnosis of mild cognitive impairment progressing to moderate, her increasing difficulty with complex financial decisions, and her susceptibility to manipulation by trusted individuals. He testified that during appointments over the past year, Vanessa had often answered questions for Mom, redirected conversations, and privately asked him not to worry Mom with scary medical terms. He'd noted these behaviors in Mom's chart as potential signs of undue influence. When Amanda asked if Mom could have knowingly consented to giving Vanessa $34,000, Dr. Martinez was unequivocal. Absolutely not. Mrs. Mitchell lacked the cognitive capacity to understand the implications of those financial decisions. Someone exploited that vulnerability. Gerald Foster's cross-examination of Dr. Martinez was a disaster. He tried to suggest that Mom's cognitive impairment was exaggerated, that I'd coached the doctor to provide damaging testimony about Vanessa. Dr. Martinez stared at him with open contempt and replied that medical diagnoses weren't based on family preferences, but on objective cognitive testing and clinical observation. He added that suggesting a physician would falsify records was professionally offensive and legally serious. Judge Valdez sustained Amanda's objection before she even made it and instructed the jury to disregard Foster's implication. Foster sat down, his face flushed. I watched Vanessa whisper urgently to him. He shook his head. Whatever she was suggesting, he wasn't doing it. The prosecution rested at 3:45 p.m. Judge Valdez adjourned until the next morning when the defense would present its case. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed mentally reviewing everything, waiting for the moment when Gerald Foster would announce that Vanessa would testify. She had to. Her entire defense required the jury to believe she'd acted with Mom's permission, that I'd misunderstood innocent family dynamics. The only way to sell that story was for Vanessa to sell it herself. At 6 a.m., I gave up on sleep and made coffee. Mom was already awake in the guest room watching morning news. I brought her breakfast on a tray: scrambled eggs, wheat toast, orange juice. She asked if I was going to my meeting again. I said yes. She told me I looked tired and should rest more. I promised I would after this week was over. She nodded and returned her attention to the television, where a weatherman was predicting rain. I kissed her forehead and left for the courthouse. Gerald Foster called Vanessa to the stand at 9:30 a.m. She wore a conservative navy dress, minimal makeup, her hair pulled back in a modest bun. She looked nothing like the woman who'd filed her nails outside my bathroom while announcing she'd stolen my car. On the stand, she was demure, soft-spoken, tearful. She testified that she'd always been close with Mom, that she'd helped manage Mom's finances because Mom had asked her to, that she'd never taken money without permission. She claimed the cash withdrawals were for household expenses, medical co-pays, and gifts Mom wanted to give to her grandchildren, Vanessa's 2 kids from a previous marriage, ages 6 and 9, who I'd met exactly 3 times in my life. She said I'd always been jealous of her relationship with Mom, that I'd never forgiven her for being Dad's favorite. She testified that the car sale was a misunderstanding, that Mom had told her she was giving the Camry to Vanessa as a gift, and Vanessa had naturally assumed she could sell it. Amanda's cross-examination started gently. She asked Vanessa to explain exactly when Mom had given her permission to access the bank accounts. Vanessa said it was ongoing, that Mom had told her multiple times she could withdraw money when needed. Amanda asked for specific dates. Vanessa couldn't provide any. Amanda asked if Vanessa had kept receipts for the household expenses she'd paid with Mom's money. Vanessa said she hadn't thought to keep them. Amanda asked about the text messages to Marcus, specifically the one about the Louboutin shoes. Vanessa claimed she'd been joking, that Marcus knew she exaggerated. Amanda asked if it was also a joke when Vanessa wrote that Mom can't remember shit anyway. Vanessa's composure cracked. She said I'd taken that out of context. Amanda asked what context made mocking your mother's cognitive impairment acceptable. Gerald Foster objected. Judge Valdez overruled. Answer the question. Vanessa stammered that she'd been frustrated, that caregiving was stressful, that sometimes people said things they didn't mean. Amanda nodded sympathetically and asked how many hours per week Vanessa had spent caregiving for Mom. Vanessa said it varied. Amanda produced phone records showing Vanessa's location data. She'd visited Mom's retirement community an average of twice per month for approximately 45 minutes per visit over the past 18 months. Amanda asked if 45 minutes twice monthly constituted intensive caregiving. Vanessa said she also called Mom regularly. Amanda showed phone records indicating an average of 3 calls per month, most lasting under 5 minutes. Amanda then asked about the forged power of attorney documents. Vanessa insisted she'd filled them out based on Mom's verbal instructions. Amanda asked if Vanessa understood that power of attorney documents required notarization and witness signatures. Vanessa said she'd planned to do that but hadn't gotten around to it. Amanda asked if Vanessa had also planned to get my permission before forging my signature on the car title. Vanessa burst into tears. The crying didn't help. Amanda waited patiently while Vanessa sobbed, then continued. She asked about Jennifer Caldwell, our cousin. Vanessa's expression shifted to panic. Amanda asked if Vanessa remembered Jennifer's mother, Aunt Dorothy. Vanessa said she did. Amanda asked if Vanessa remembered writing checks from Aunt Dorothy's checkbook without permission 4 years ago. Gerald Foster objected strenuously. Prior bad acts were inadmissible. Amanda argued that Vanessa's testimony had opened the door by claiming she'd never done anything wrong before and didn't understand her actions were harmful. Judge Valdez called a sidebar. After 3 minutes of hushed argument, she allowed the question. Vanessa denied taking money from Aunt Dorothy. Amanda asked if Vanessa would be surprised to learn that Jennifer had provided bank statements showing 6 forged checks totaling $4,200. Vanessa said Jennifer was lying. Amanda said nothing, just returned to her seat. The jury watched Vanessa cry. Not one of them looked sympathetic. Gerald Foster tried redirect. He asked Vanessa about her children, attempting to portray her as a struggling single mother doing her best. Vanessa composed herself enough to describe financial difficulties, mounting bills, the pressure of raising 2 kids alone. She said she'd made mistakes but never meant to hurt anyone. She loved Mom. She loved me, even though I'd turned against her. She just wanted her family back. When Foster finished, Amanda requested recross. Judge Valdez allowed it. Amanda asked one question. Ms. Mitchell, if you loved your mother so much, why did you tell Brandon Harper that your sister was dead so you could sell her car? Vanessa had no answer. Amanda sat down. The defense rested. Closing arguments were scheduled for the next morning. That night, I took Mom to her favorite restaurant, an Italian place with red checkered tablecloths and breadsticks she loved. She seemed happy, talking about a friend from the retirement community who'd called to check on her. She didn't ask about the trial. She didn't mention Vanessa. We ate chicken parmesan and shared tiramisu, and for 90 minutes I pretended we were just a daughter and mother having dinner. When we got home, Mom went to bed early. I sat in my living room with a glass of wine I didn't drink, staring at my phone. Marcus had called twice. Vanessa had called from a number I didn't recognize. I blocked it. At midnight, I finally went to bed. Tomorrow, the jury would decide if Vanessa's choices had consequences. I already knew they did. I was living those consequences every time I helped Mom remember where the bathroom was. Every time I explained again why Vanessa wasn't visiting. Every time I saw confusion cloud her eyes when she couldn't recall what year it was. Amanda's closing argument was a masterpiece. She recapped the evidence systematically. The forged documents, the bank records, the text messages, the lies. She reminded the jury that Vanessa had called me dead to facilitate stealing my car. She highlighted Dr. Martinez's testimony about Mom's vulnerability. She pointed out that Vanessa had shown no genuine remorse, only self-pity and deflection. She told the jury that elder financial abuse was a serious crime because it targeted those least able to defend themselves, and that Vanessa had targeted her own mother with calculated precision. She asked them to hold Vanessa accountable for every felony count. Gerald Foster's closing was brief and unconvincing. He asked for mercy, suggested the family could heal with counseling, implied I was as much to blame as Vanessa for the family dysfunction. When he sat down, Vanessa was crying again. The jury looked unmoved. Judge Valdez read the instructions. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. When they returned, the forewoman was the social worker who'd dealt with elder abuse cases. She read the verdict on each count in a clear, steady voice. Count 1, forgery, guilty. Count 2, identity theft, guilty. Count 3, financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, guilty. Count 4, grand theft, guilty. Count 5, fraud, guilty. Vanessa collapsed forward onto the defense table. Marcus, sitting in the gallery, made a choking sound. I felt nothing but a cold satisfaction. Judge Valdez scheduled sentencing for 6 weeks out and remanded Vanessa into custody pending a probation report. Bail was revoked. Vanessa was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs, her navy dress wrinkled, mascara streaking her face. She looked at me once as the bailiff guided her past the gallery. I met her eyes and smiled. She looked away. The probation report recommended the maximum sentence on all counts, noting Vanessa's lack of remorse, her attempts to blame others, and her violation of the restraining order. The report detailed her criminal history, minor, mostly shoplifting and bad checks in her 20s, and emphasized that this represented an escalation. Jennifer's statement about Aunt Dorothy was included as evidence of pattern behavior. The forensic psychologist who'd evaluated Vanessa described her as having narcissistic personality traits and a profound sense of entitlement. The report concluded that Vanessa posed a continued threat to vulnerable individuals and that incarceration was necessary for public safety. Amanda forwarded me a copy the day it was filed. I read it twice, then filed it in my growing folder of legal documents. Sentencing day arrived on a Tuesday in June. The courtroom was less crowded than during trial. Just me, Marcus, Jennifer, who'd driven 8 hours to attend, and a reporter from the local newspaper. Amanda presented victim impact evidence, including statements from Mom's doctor about the stress-related decline in her condition since discovering the thefts. I'd submitted a written statement but declined to speak in court. I didn't need to perform my pain for Vanessa's benefit. Gerald Foster argued for concurrent sentences and credit for time served. He claimed Vanessa had learned her lesson. Judge Valdez reviewed the probation report silently for 3 full minutes before speaking. When she did, her tone was ice. Judge Valdez sentenced Vanessa to 7 years in state prison, consecutive sentences on the major counts, totaling 84 months before parole eligibility. She ordered full restitution of $34,173 to Mom, plus $8,000 to Brandon Harper, plus $6,000 in court fees and fines. She maintained the lifetime restraining order, protecting Mom from any contact with Vanessa. She noted for the record that Vanessa's crimes represented a profound betrayal of trust, and that vulnerable seniors deserve the full protection of the law. Vanessa stood silent throughout, her face blank. When the judge finished, the bailiff led Vanessa away. She didn't look back. Marcus left the courtroom immediately, his shoulders hunched. I stayed seated while Amanda packed her files. She turned to me and said this was one of the most satisfying convictions of her career. I thanked her. We shook hands. I walked out of the courthouse into summer sunshine. The civil cases came next. I sued Vanessa on Mom's behalf for the full restitution amount plus damages, obtaining a default judgment when Vanessa failed to respond from prison. I placed liens on anything Vanessa owned, which wasn't much, just a leased car she could no longer pay for, and some furniture in her rental apartment. Marcus had left her, taking the kids and filing for full custody within 2 weeks of sentencing. His attorney cited Vanessa's incarceration and criminal history. The judge granted it without contest. Vanessa's parental rights were modified to supervised visitation only, pending completion of her sentence. She'd effectively lost everything: her freedom, her children, her partner, and any claim to family money or property. Brandon's civil suit against Vanessa resulted in another judgment, this one for $8,000 plus legal fees. He'd never see that money either, but the judgments would follow Vanessa for decades. Mom's condition stabilized under my care. With the stress of Vanessa's manipulation removed, her cognitive scores actually improved slightly. Not a reversal, Dr. Martinez explained, but the absence of active harm allowed her baseline abilities to function better. She attended a memory care day program 3 times per week where she did art projects and socialized with peers. She remembered my name consistently. She occasionally asked about Vanessa. I told her Vanessa was away and couldn't visit. Mom would nod and change the subject. I don't know if she remembered why Vanessa was gone or if the details slipped away each time. It didn't matter. She was safe. That was enough. I never rescheduled the colonoscopy. My doctor's office sent 3 reminder notices before I finally called and explained what had happened. The scheduler was sympathetic and mentioned that family stress often derailed medical appointments. She booked me for August, 4 months after the trial ended. The prep was just as miserable the second time, but I completed it without interruption. The procedure found nothing concerning, just routine polyps, removed and biopsied as precautionary. I was clear for another 5 years. Driving home afterward, still groggy from sedation, I thought about that morning in April when Vanessa had pounded on my bathroom door. If she'd waited 1 more day, I'd have been at the endoscopy center when she sold my car. I might not have documented everything immediately. The detective might have found my complaint less credible without contemporaneous evidence. Vanessa's timing had been her own undoing. She'd been so eager to gloat that she'd given me the window I needed to act. 6 months after sentencing, I received a letter from Vanessa. It had been screened by prison officials and forwarded through my attorney, per the restraining order protocols. Amanda called to ask if I wanted to read it. I said no. She offered to summarize it. I said no again. Whatever Vanessa had written, apology, justification, or more blame, I didn't need to hear it. Amanda said that was probably wise, and that she'd file the letter with the court records as evidence of attempted contact in violation of the protective order. I asked if that would extend Vanessa's sentence. Amanda said probably not, but it would document the pattern for parole hearings. Good enough. I hung up and deleted Amanda's voicemail. Vanessa could write 1,000 letters. I'd never read one. Jennifer and I stayed in touch. She visited twice, bringing her mother, Aunt Dorothy, to meet Mom. They sat in my living room drinking tea and looking through old photo albums, pointing at pictures from family reunions 30 years ago. Aunt Dorothy told Mom she was sorry for not staying closer after Dad died. Mom patted her hand and said family was complicated. They both laughed. Jennifer pulled me aside in the kitchen and asked how I was really doing. I told her I was fine. She said I didn't have to be fine. I said I wasn't performing. I genuinely felt fine. Maybe that made me cold. Jennifer shook her head. She said it made me realistic. Some people didn't deserve forgiveness. Some people made choices that severed relationships permanently. Vanessa had made those choices. Living well despite her wasn't cold. It was survival. I hugged Jennifer. We finished our tea. The Camry was returned to me 8 months after the trial, released from evidence storage. It had been sitting in an impound lot accumulating dust but was otherwise undamaged. I paid the storage fees, $640, and drove it home. The interior smelled stale. Brandon's air freshener, a pine tree on the rearview mirror, still hung there. I threw it away and rolled down the windows. The car ran perfectly. I'd kept up the insurance and registration even while it was impounded, maintaining the fiction that it had never stopped being mine, because it hadn't. The title had been corrected, Vanessa's forged signature voided, my legitimate ownership restored. I took Mom for a drive the next weekend, out to the coast where she liked to watch the ocean. She fell asleep in the passenger seat on the drive home, her head against the window, breathing peacefully. I glanced at her at a stoplight and felt something settle in my chest. This was what winning looked like. Quiet. Ordinary. Mine. 3 years passed. Mom's condition declined gradually, but not precipitously. She moved from my guest room to a memory care facility that I'd researched exhaustively, a place with a high staff-to-resident ratio and daily activities. She seemed content there, participating in music therapy and gardening programs. I visited 4 times a week, bringing her favorite foods and playing card games she could still manage. Go fish mostly, the rules simple enough that her failing memory could hold them. She knew my face, if not always my name. Sometimes she called me by her sister's name. I didn't correct her. What mattered was that she smiled when I arrived. Vanessa came up for parole after serving 4 years. The parole board held a hearing. Amanda contacted me to ask if I wanted to submit a statement. I wrote 3 pages detailing the impact of Vanessa's crimes on Mom's health, the ongoing cost of Mom's care, and my belief that Vanessa remained a danger to vulnerable people. I noted that she'd never paid $1 of the court-ordered restitution, that her wages from the prison laundry program were garnished but amounted to less than $50 total. I stated clearly that I opposed parole. The board denied Vanessa's application. She'd be eligible again in 18 months. I'd write another statement then. And 18 months after that, for as long as it took. Marcus remarried. I only knew because Jennifer mentioned seeing the wedding announcement in her hometown newspaper. Marcus had moved back to the small town where he'd grown up, taking the kids with him. His new wife was a kindergarten teacher, by all accounts a stable and kind woman. Jennifer said the kids looked happy in the photos, well-dressed and smiling. I felt relieved for them. They hadn't asked to be born to a mother who prioritized her own desires over everyone else's well-being. They deserved better than Vanessa had given them. Maybe they'd found it. My life settled into a rhythm. I worked, visited Mom, maintained the house, and occasionally dated. Nothing serious, just dinner and conversation with people who didn't know my history. I never mentioned Vanessa. If asked about siblings, I said I was an only child. It wasn't exactly true, but it wasn't exactly false either. The sister I'd grown up with, who'd taught me to ride a bike and braided my hair for school pictures, had been replaced somewhere along the way by a stranger who viewed family as exploitable resources. That stranger was serving time in a state correctional facility 240 miles away. The sister from childhood was gone. I'd grieved her years ago. The civil judgments remained unpaid. I'd attached them to Vanessa's prison trust account, her future tax refunds, and any wages she might earn upon release. The amounts would follow her indefinitely, accumulating interest. If she ever inherited money, unlikely given that Mom's estate would pass to me as guardian and sole beneficiary, I'd seize it immediately. If she won the lottery, even more unlikely, I'd be first in line. The judgments were forever, a financial anchor that would drag behind her for the rest of her life. Every job application asking about judgments. Every apartment rental running credit checks. Every attempt to build something would be shadowed by the debt she owed. I'd made sure of it. On the 5th anniversary of the trial, I drove to the coast alone. I sat on the beach where I'd taken Mom that weekend after getting the Camry back. The ocean was gray and turbulent, wind whipping sand against my legs. I thought about the morning Vanessa had interrupted my colonoscopy prep. How that moment had felt like a catastrophe. 5 years later, it was the catalyst that had freed Mom from systematic abuse and given me clarity about who Vanessa really was. I'd never thanked Vanessa for being so blatant in her cruelty. Her arrogance had been her downfall. If she'd been subtler, more patient, I might not have gathered evidence so thoroughly. But she'd been so certain she'd get away with it, so confident I'd never fight back, that she'd handed me everything I needed to destroy her. I smiled at the ocean and drove home. Mom died 2 months later, peacefully, in her sleep at the memory care facility. She was 76. The staff said she'd eaten a full dinner, watched television in the common room, and gone to bed at her usual time. A caregiver found her in the morning when she didn't wake for breakfast. I was grateful it had been peaceful. Grateful she hadn't suffered. Grateful she'd been safe and cared for at the end, surrounded by people who treated her with dignity. I arranged a small funeral, just me and Jennifer and a few of Mom's friends from the facility. I didn't notify Vanessa. The obituary listed me as Mom's only surviving child. Jennifer raised her eyebrows at that but said nothing. We buried Mom next to Dad. The gravestone was simple, her name and dates and the phrase "beloved mother" underneath. It was true. I had loved her. I still did. The estate was straightforward. I was executor and sole beneficiary. Mom's assets totaled approximately $190,000 after selling her retirement community apartment and liquidating her accounts. After funeral expenses and final medical bills, I netted $172,000. I deposited it in a trust fund for Mom's grandchildren who would actually remember her fondly, Jennifer's kids, who'd visited Mom regularly and sent her drawings she'd hung on her facility room wall. Vanessa's children would receive nothing from their grandmother's estate. Their mother had stolen their inheritance years before Mom died. I felt no guilt about that decision. Actions had consequences. Vanessa had taught me that. 6 months after Mom's funeral, I received a notification that Vanessa was up for parole again. This time, her attorney had submitted a packet arguing that Mom's death meant the victim was no longer at risk, and that Vanessa had completed anger management and financial literacy courses in prison. The parole board scheduled a hearing for March. Amanda, though no longer obligated to represent the case, called me personally to ask if I planned to oppose. I told her I'd already written my statement. She said she'd submit a prosecutorial recommendation against parole. The hearing lasted 20 minutes. Vanessa, appearing via video link from the prison, claimed she'd found religion and wanted to rebuild her relationship with her children. She said she understood now that what she'd done was wrong. The board asked about restitution. Vanessa admitted she'd paid only $63 over 5 years. The board denied parole unanimously. Next eligibility, 18 months. I sold Mom's Camry finally. It had served its purpose, carrying us through 3 years of doctor's appointments and coastal drives and grocery runs. But I didn't need the memories anymore, and the car was just a car. A young woman buying her first vehicle came to look at it, a college student majoring in nursing. She reminded me a little of myself at that age, cautious, thorough, asking all the right questions about maintenance history and accident reports. I gave her every record, every receipt, every oil change document from the past 12 years. She paid the asking price, $6,000 fair market value, and drove away smiling. I deposited the check and used half of it to upgrade Mom's gravestone, adding a small granite bench beside it where visitors could sit. Jennifer sent me a photo when she visited the cemetery that summer. The bench looked perfect. Vanessa's ex-boyfriend Marcus sent me a Facebook friend request. I deleted it immediately and blocked him. 2 weeks later, he sent a message through Jennifer, claiming he wanted to apologize for not seeing who Vanessa really was sooner. Jennifer asked if I wanted to hear him out. I said no. Marcus had been complicit, enjoying the Louboutins and the cash while ignoring where it came from. His guilt now that Vanessa was incarcerated didn't interest me. He could live with his choices the same way Vanessa was living with hers. Jennifer said she understood and never mentioned him again. Some people wanted absolution they hadn't earned. I wasn't in the business of granting it. The years continued. I changed jobs, moving from medical billing to healthcare administration at a hospital system 3 counties over. Better pay, better hours, better benefits. I bought a small house with a garden where I grew tomatoes and herbs. I adopted a dog from the shelter, a beagle mix named Cooper who slept at the foot of my bed and accompanied me on evening walks. Life was ordinary in the best way. Predictable, peaceful, mine. I went on dates occasionally. One relationship lasted 8 months before ending amicably when he accepted a job in another state. I didn't try to maintain it long distance. I'd learned that some things weren't meant to last forever, and that was fine. Vanessa's children, my niece and nephew technically, though I'd never played that role, grew up without knowing me. Marcus had moved them across the country and changed their school records to list only him and his new wife as family contacts. I saw photos sometimes when Jennifer's mother mentioned seeing them at a cousin's wedding or graduation. They looked healthy and happy, untouched by the chaos their mother had created. That was the best possible outcome. They didn't need the burden of understanding what Vanessa had done. Let them remember her as someone who'd made mistakes and was serving time. Let them never know the calculated cruelty behind those mistakes. They deserved to build lives uncomplicated by her choices. 7 years after sentencing, Vanessa was released on parole. Amanda called to inform me the day it happened, her voice tight with frustration. The parole board had finally granted release based on prison overcrowding and Vanessa's completion of required programs. She'd served 7 years of an 8-year sentence. The conditions of her parole were extensive: mandatory counseling, weekly check-ins with a parole officer, continued restraining order prohibiting contact with me, prohibition on working with vulnerable populations, and garnishment of 70% of any wages toward the unpaid restitution. Amanda said Vanessa had been released to a halfway house in a city 90 miles from where Mom had lived. She had no car, no savings, and no support system. Amanda asked if I felt safe. I said yes. Vanessa knew what would happen if she contacted me. She'd go directly back to prison. She wasn't that stupid. I was wrong. 3 months after her release, Vanessa showed up at my workplace. I was leaving the hospital administration building at 5:30 p.m., walking to my car in the employee parking garage, when I saw her standing beside my vehicle. She looked older, harsh, hollow-cheeked, her hair badly dyed blonde and showing gray roots. She wore discount store clothes that hung loosely on a frame that had lost weight in prison. She didn't approach me immediately, just stood there watching me. I stopped walking, pulled out my phone, and dialed 911. She saw me do it and held up both hands in a placating gesture. I completed the call anyway, giving the dispatcher my location and stating that someone with an active restraining order was violating it. Vanessa's face shifted from pleading to angry. She started walking toward me. I stood my ground, phone still to my ear, the dispatcher asking if I was in immediate danger. "You couldn't just let it go," Vanessa said, her voice hoarse. 7 years, Rebecca. 7 years of my life gone because you couldn't forgive me. I lowered the phone slightly, keeping the call connected. "You stole from our mother. You forged my signature. You told someone I was dead so you could steal my car. I didn't take 7 years from you. You chose those actions. This is the consequence." "She was my mother too," Vanessa said, and her voice broke. "You didn't even tell me she died. I found out from a prison counselor who saw the obituary. I couldn't go to her funeral. I couldn't say goodbye. You said goodbye when you decided her bank account mattered more than her well-being." Vanessa took another step forward. I could hear sirens in the distance. She heard them too. "I just wanted to talk, to explain, to ask you to drop the restitution so I can actually afford to live." "No. Rebecca, please, I have nothing. No job will hire me with my record. The restitution garnishment takes everything I earn. I'm living in a halfway house, sleeping on a cot. My kids won't talk to me. I've lost everything." "Yes," I said simply. "You have." The police arrived, 2 patrol cars pulling into the garage with lights flashing. Vanessa saw them and her face crumpled. She knew what was coming. The officers approached, hands near their belts, asking her to identify herself. She gave her name. They asked me to confirm she had a restraining order. I showed them the laminated copy I still carried in my purse, even after all these years. They arrested her on the spot, placing her in handcuffs while reading her rights. She didn't struggle. She just looked at me with hollow eyes and said, "You really never forgave me." I met her gaze and replied, "No, I never did." They put her in the patrol car. I gave a statement to the officers, provided my contact information, and drove home. Cooper greeted me at the door, tail wagging. I fed him dinner and poured myself a glass of wine I actually drank this time. Vanessa's parole was revoked the following week. She was returned to state prison to serve the remainder of her original sentence plus an additional 6 months for the parole violation. The parole board noted in their decision that she demonstrated continued disregard for court orders and lacked genuine rehabilitation. She wouldn't be eligible for parole again until she completed the full sentence, which would be another 1.5 years. Amanda sent me the court documents with a note. Some people never learn. I filed them with the rest of the legal paperwork in a banker's box in my closet, a chronicle of Vanessa's choices and their consequences. I never saw Vanessa again in person. She was transferred to a facility in the northern part of the state, far from anywhere I had reason to visit. I heard from Jennifer occasionally that Vanessa tried to contact her kids through social media, but Marcus had blocked all her accounts and the children, now teenagers, had no interest in rebuilding a relationship with a mother they barely remembered. Vanessa sent Jennifer a letter asking her to intervene with me about the restitution. Jennifer forwarded it to my attorney without comment. I had my attorney respond with a formal cease and desist. Vanessa never contacted Jennifer again. The restitution remained unpaid. Even after Vanessa was eventually released, this time after serving every day of her sentence with no early parole, she worked minimum wage jobs that barely covered basic survival after the garnishment. The debt accumulated interest at the court-mandated rate. After 10 years, she owed over $60,000. After 15, nearly $90,000. The judgments would outlive both of us, attachable to any inheritance she might someday receive, any lottery winnings, any windfall of any kind. She'd die in debt to Mom's estate. That seemed appropriate. I thought about her rarely. When I did, it was with the same mild detachment I'd feel remembering a news story about a criminal I'd never met. She'd become a stranger, someone whose choices had intersected with my life once and then diverged permanently. I'd built a good life in the aftermath of her betrayal, a career I enjoyed, a home I loved, friendships that sustained me. I'd traveled, taking trips to places Mom had always wanted to visit. Ireland, the coast of Maine, the Grand Canyon. I scattered some of her ashes at each location, carrying her to the adventures she'd never had while she was caring for everyone else. It felt like closing circles, giving her the freedom in death she'd been denied in life. 20 years after that morning when Vanessa pounded on my bathroom door, I stood in my garden harvesting tomatoes. Cooper had passed years ago, replaced by a rescue lab named Daisy, who was currently digging holes near the fence. I was 64 years old, considering retirement, living a life I'd built deliberately from the rubble of family betrayal. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Is this Rebecca Mitchell?" A woman's voice, professional but gentle. "Yes. This is Nurse Patterson from Valley Medical Center. I'm calling about Vanessa Mitchell. You're listed as her emergency contact in our system from years ago. I'm required to notify you that she was admitted 3 days ago and passed away this morning." I stood very still, a tomato in my hand, Daisy barking at something in the neighbor's yard. "What happened?" "Liver failure. She'd been ill for some time but didn't seek treatment until it was too late. I'm sorry for your loss." I thanked her, took down the information about claiming the body, and ended the call. Then I stood in my garden for a long time, feeling nothing except a distant sense of completion. Vanessa had died alone in a hospital at 62, her body destroyed by years of stress and poor self-care and choices that had isolated her from everyone who might have helped. There would be no funeral. She had no money for one, and I wasn't paying. The county would handle the cremation. Her children, now adults with families of their own, would be notified, but I doubted they'd claim her ashes. I certainly wouldn't. I called Jennifer that evening. She was quiet for a moment after I told her, then said simply, "She made her choices." We talked about other things, her grandchildren, my retirement plans, a trip we were considering to Scotland next spring. Vanessa's death was a footnote in the conversation, no more significant than mentioning a change in the weather. When we hung up, I poured a glass of wine and sat on my back porch watching the sunset. Daisy settled at my feet, warm and solid and real. I'd won, not in any dramatic, cinematic way. I'd won by surviving, by building a life she couldn't touch, by refusing to let her betrayal define me. She'd lost everything she'd stolen and everything she'd taken for granted. She'd died alone, unmourned, leaving nothing behind but debt and broken relationships. The restitution would be written off now. You can't garnish wages from the dead. But that didn't matter. The money had never been the point. The point was that actions have consequences. The point was that betrayal has a cost. The point was that some things, once broken, stay broken. Vanessa had learned those lessons too late. I'd learned them in time to save myself. I finished my wine and went inside. Tomorrow I'd call the hospital and tell them I wasn't claiming the body. Tomorrow I'd notify my attorney to file the final paperwork closing out the civil judgments. Tomorrow I'd continue my ordinary, hard-won, peaceful life. Tonight I went to bed in a house I owned, in a life I'd built, free from anyone who'd ever hurt me. That was the victory, not revenge, just the simple, profound triumph of living well despite everything she'd tried to take from me. Vanessa was gone. I remained. That was justice enough.